It's 12 o'clock in Frisco, Texas, and it's time for Smoker Broker Radio with Robert Meche, a.k.a. the Smoker Broker. Robert is the owner of Small World Realty and has employed hundreds of real estate agents in his 17-year career. He has instructed and mentored over 10,000 real estate agents at the highly acclaimed Champions School of Real Estate and is considered an expert in Texas residential realty. Robert is also an advocate of true entrepreneurial spirit and has helped many to transition from corporate America into the world of self-employment. And now live from the studio to your world, the Smoker Broker.
Hey, welcome to Smoker Broker. I'm Robert Meche, and I am the guy they call Smoker Broker. Man, if Ringling, Barley, and all those guys are alive right now, I am running a three-ring circus. I've got so many things spinning in my head right now. I'm trying to concentrate to make sure that I give you a good show today. My buddy over there, Brent, always tells me to let him know when I'm on my ADD medication, and I am on it right now.
I was going to ask you.
I've got so much stuff that is just flying in and out. I literally am going minute to minute right now. And that's completely.
Sounds like you need to cut back a little bit.
What's that, Dallas?
Sounds like you need to cut back a little bit.
Yeah, man, I tell you, I wish I had more. You know, it's by the way, I don't have real ADD, but I actually have some medication to help me with other things sometimes. But I'm telling you, if I had any more on the plate right now, and I don't say that negatively, some people complain about having lots to do. Some people are just like, oh, there's not enough time. I love it. I mean, I'd rather it this way, but literally every minute there's something on the plate right now with everything that's going on. So I love living my life like that. But whew, man, today for some reason, it's just one thing after another. Got so much going on, you know, from a social side, from a work side, from a world side. There's so many things that are happening right now. And as always, we start the show off with a little bit of a summary as to what the current events are that are affecting us. They have been the same kind of for the last few months, but they kind of are starting to differ just a little bit with the changing of things. Now, by the way, you guys are going to hear some nail pops back there because we are remodeling the house, so that's all good. We've had that kind of regular over the show the past few months, but we're almost about to have our own studio, so hopefully that won't be a problem here in the next up and coming weeks. So you got the biggest one out there right now, you know, the president election has, I guess we're going to say it has been called, but it's not true. But I think all of us agree that that's going to work out the way it's been communicated so far. So whether that's good or bad for you, it doesn't matter because it is what it is. And we move forward like we always do with everything. We adjust and we do what we need to do. I kind of mentioned it last week, no matter what your preference is when it comes to politics, in the end, whoever's in that office, it really doesn't affect our daily lives that much. Dallas has the same problems that he has, whether it was Trump or Biden. Nothing has changed for him. So he's going to continue to run the same way he always has. And he's representative of the rest of us too. Yes, there are some things that matter, but in the end we move on. We're resilient people, and some of us are happy, some of us are not, and it's okay. But one thing hopefully that everybody agrees on is hopefully we can get past all of the uncertainty we've had over the last few months and try to get back to some type of consistency and putting plans in place for us to get past all the other things that we have. And that other thing being, you know, the nastiness of COVID that's still out there that we continue to navigate through. This past week, I don't know what to believe anymore. Honestly, it's so hard to watch the news. It's so unreliable at times. And now you got back where there's more surges again. I don't know whether it's true or not. I don't know whether it's the fact that the flu season's in and there's confusion. I don't even know whether I believe how accurate the testing is for all of it. But nonetheless, it's a fear that's out there. It's a fear that we live with. And we continue to adapt. I have to admit, I was surprised where they're starting to talk about going back into some of the closures again. I really thought, and this is personal opinion, by the way, I really thought that was an awful idea the first time we did it because I felt if we had social distance enough that it would have been fine. But now they're coming back and they're talking about doing it again. And God, I know I'm opinionated with this, and it's my show and I will be opinionated on it. and this actually probably does annoy or people differ with me on it, and we can talk about it some other time if you want, but I don't know, that closing stuff down, it didn't work the first time and it's not going to work again. And until every single person commits to doing what they think should be done, it won't work. So I don't know where we're heading with all of this stuff. Honestly, this is probably the most, uh, I guess the most communicative I've been on my feelings about that, because I'm against them closing that stuff down again. It was a horrible idea.
It's the
I'm all
medication.
for social distancing. Brent?
It's just the medication. That's why you're being so vocal.
Fortunately, that makes me think better. So I don't know where we're going with that. I'm all for, don't get me wrong, I'm all for social distancing. I take the virus extremely serious. I do the best I can when I'm out and about, whether I agree with it or not. I'm very respectful of everybody else, but closing this thing down again, I do not agree with that. I don't think it's going to stop, what's happening. But again, that's my opinion. It doesn't matter. But as it affects real estate, it is something that we're dealing with, because it does continue to possibly hamper what we're doing right now. Now, our market is thriving, and we're not as much of a concern as everybody else, but there are consequences to, if that's not fixed, the people that do buy houses, if their income's affected by constant closures, then we are going to have issues. So we do pay very close attention, and why we talk about COVID at the beginning of every show since March, it is something that's out there, and it's like an ugly, just grim reaper that stays over us. And, you just want to want it to go away, and it will to some extent, but not for a while. There was great conversation about the vaccine this week. Pfizer came out. Everybody was in agreement that they believe it's almost 90% effective. And that is really, really good news. Even the people that don't like each other agreed that they felt that the vaccine is in place. Now, you get to the other side of this, everybody's excited about that, but you still have a distribution problem. It's going to take a long time to get that stuff out. So, you're still looking at January, February, and March, and we're already knees deep into the flu season by that point. So nothing's fun about the next few months. They are right. We're going to continue to have a lot of pain. There's going to continue to be some little morbidness to this thing. There is hope and there's light, but God, it's certainly going to put a very bad damper on the holidays. I think for the first time in my life, it is very hard. I'm probably the most positive, outgoing guy, but even for me, it's like, God, this sucks, man. This holiday stuff, and just getting past the year and trying to get to where something is fixing this issue. But I've held up the entire time, and I'm still positive about the ultimate outlook of it. But God, it does suck. It just wears on you. Just like you want it to go away. And any friend that you have that has had family that's passed, that's awful. And, people who are just having to deal with it, their jobs that are affected more than your job's affected. It's just awful. And you keep thinking that it's away and we have control over it. And then these waves just come back in, and it just, like I said, just depresses everybody. So just a tough time period for all of us. We're definitely going to get through it. Hopefully the holidays don't have to be such a wet mop. It's unfortunate that so many people aren't going to actually celebrate the holidays this year like they normally do. And that's fine. I think for some people, maybe that's necessary, but you can only do so much. I will tell you on a personal level, it's hard too. Just the constant interaction with people. One of my longtime friends was in town this week, and man, I hadn't seen. He really is just he's like a second or third brother to me, and you just want to give him like the biggest bear hug, and you can't even touch him because there's that risk with the virus. It's very hard to accept, especially for social outgoing people. It's very difficult. So nothing's changed there.
So it's perfect for you. You're good.
Yeah, right. All good. All good. Everything's fine. Okay. We are going to talk about setting expectations today. That's one of my favorite shows because it's not just a real estate show. The Smoker Broker Show is set up for primarily focusing on real estate, but it does have a hint of talking about entrepreneurship, business in general, breaking away from the corporate chains and all that type of stuff. And today's a good one because we are going to talk from the business expertise of setting expectations. Because no matter what business you are in, whether it's real estate, whether you're in chemistry, whatever, it doesn't matter. Anything that's even random, you have to be able to set expectations. Expectations is a foundation builder for all of life, for everything that you do on a daily basis, for everything that you do socially, professionally, everything that's out there. It starts with setting an expectation. So we are going to give you a vision of expectations as to how they relate into the real estate world, but they are expectations that can be used for just about anything you do. Everybody who knows me, everybody who watches the show, and all the archive watchers, which, by the way, thank y'all for last week. I think we had over 850 views, which means we will probably cross 1,000. We had 1,000 people somewhat either browse over or actually watch the show last week. So thank y'all for that. We love it when those numbers get up there. That's a very relevant number for us to hit. That's great for our advertisers that advertise on the show. In fact, so that'll be a good flow today. Today, I'm actually going to do our advertising sponsors in front versus in the back, because a lot of times once I get going, I forget, and they're so important to us. So I do have a new sponsor that I want to bring in. And it's a good one because we're so concerned. There's so much discussion about health insurance, and I think it's difficult to find people that you can trust when it comes to discussing with health insurance. And I have a lot of faith and happiness about this particular sponsor because it's somebody that's near and dear to us, because it actually is the father of our director of operations, Brent Holberg. It's his father, and that doesn't mean anything when it comes to the fact that he's close and he's in the family. Because the sponsor that we're going to do is super serious in what he does. But what I can do, and more than anybody, is vouch for, if I want to talk to someone who is just super honest and has the highest integrity when it comes to this type of topic, this is the guy that I would talk to. So he's with Liberator Health Insurance, has plans that allow you to see any doctor and go to any hospital in or out of a network. You can save 40 to 60% on your premiums. Liberator just insured a family of 4 with great benefits for $475 a month. These plans offer the largest PPO provider network in the United States, and it covers hospitalization, surgeries, doctor visits, preventive health screenings, teledoc, x-rays, MRIs, labs, emergency rooms, and urgent care. And it's so much more. It says, with recent changes in healthcare laws, you're now free to choose a health insurance plan that fits your needs, not some expensive government mandated one size that fits all the programs. So if you want more information, you can call Mr. Greg Holberg at Independent Health Insurance Broker at 214-886-4688. I think his information is right there below. And of course, you can visit them at liberatorhealthinsurance.com. Great. That's awesome. Thank you for putting that up there too. And then you have his information right there at the bottom. Okay, and then let's go to our longtime sponsor, which is Martin Cooley with BPG Inspections. Now, obviously, you have a choice when it comes to picking a home inspector. We always tell our clients, we at least give them 3 referrals so that they are the ones who choose it. And we tell them to interview each of those people to make sure they pick the right one. But I'd be lying if we didn't say that we favor them choosing Martin over a general inspector. Martin's been with us for a very long time. He is extremely confident in what he does. We have never had one issue with the gentleman in all these years, and that's very hard when it comes to home inspecting because there's so many problems. He's very simplistic in his review, but he's very thorough. He follows the state doctrine to the T. He doesn't scare you, but he tells you this is what you would do. He's also great for people who review, like supervisors such as me, who review a lot of the inspections, because it makes it easier because he summarizes it up in the beginning in a very easy way that shows us what should be fixed versus what shouldn't be fixed. So I don't have to read through a 60-page dossier. So always very appreciative of Martin. His information is right below. He is with BPG Inspections, who is parented by the Fidelity company. You can reach them at 817-401-3240. Again, Martin, thank you for your long-time sponsorship. And I thought that flowed very nicely because we do have a lot of views on the show. We are very well known in the state of Texas, especially in the Dallas-Fort Worth, San Antonio, Austin. And I almost forgot to start the show off with another thing that's super exciting for us personally and on a personal level is we just entered into the Houston market. This is like the crown gem of the state of Texas. We have been wanting to do this for so long, and we just announced this past week that we are finally joining forces with the Keller Williams folks down there at the Metropolitan office in Houston. And we are going to start entering that market. And we could not be happier. Super excited about the guy we have down there, Mr. George Renfro. He is going to be our regional partner that helps us with the recruiting and the operations down there. And God, this guy was just like a luck find with the amount of similarities he had and the visions we have at SWR. So that's more to come on that. Super excited with that. Okay, as always, I got my guys. We're 15 minutes in the show. I might as well introduce them. I got Mike Dallas over here, one of my longtime friends, and a very good real estate agent, very studious, even though he doesn't look it, very sharp when it comes to understanding real estate law, and he's overall a genuinely good guy. He's actually excited. He's also a longtime golf friend of mine, and I got to play with him for the first time in probably a year. And it was really embarrassing because he was awful and he really needs to work on his game. But anybody doesn't know, Mike is actually, he hates it because he doesn't believe he is anymore, but he's a professional golfer. Even though he doesn't play near as much. And of course his touch isn't where he wants it to be, but even blind, the guy can go out and shoot in the 70s if he wants to. So I always love having him around, love his friendship for all the time. And I do like the fact when he's on the show, he doesn't talk very much, one, because I do most of the talking, but the things that he says actually are pretty relevant. So I love having him on, and he's become a staple to the show. And then I got my buddy down there, Brent Holberg. Everybody knows Brent. He runs the operations at SWR. He too is a longtime friend, not as long as Dallas, but he's become just as important in our family. And he runs the show with me. Of course, his expertise in this material is relevant as we discuss all the things that we do in real estate. So thank you guys for coming on. So let's talk about the expectation side of it. We can go a lot of different ways when it comes to setting expectations, but let's have a general business conversation to start it off. Brent, if you're talking about expectations from a general level, what are some things that ring in your head that you want to do? And if you want to marry that to real estate to make it easier, then that's fine. But see if you can be general with an expectation standpoint, what you expect when you do anything.
Well, I've been a big believer in over-promising and under-delivering.
Yeah,
I just want people to really get their hopes up and then just to be thoroughly let down at the end. Oh, no, that's not what
I didn't catch it. You said that. I first thought you were saying what I thought you were saying, and I'm like, oh, he said it the opposite way.
Yes. No, I mean, I think just in general, when we get into business or any type of relationship with anybody, there needs to be a set understanding on who's going to do what and who's going to be accountable, right? I think a lot of times people kind of limp into a deal and they don't set boundaries and expectations for each other. And then that's when the biggest blow-ups happen because the ball gets dropped somewhere.
Yeah, that's pretty good for not even being prepared to answer that question.
I'm out.
That's exactly what it's about. It's setting a parameter that you know that you're going to execute and you're getting ready to put that plan in place, but at least you have steps and that everybody's aware of those steps. And that's why that is a good general explanation, because no matter whether you're doing real estate, no matter whether you're doing accounting, Mike, we can even talk about, in your heyday golf days, Mike's an excellent golf instructor. When you set off to start teaching somebody, there's expectations there. Now, the funny part about you is expectations can be high and low when it comes to golf, right? And we go 100 different ways. I mean, your expectation of me 20 years later is still awful, and I still haven't implemented the plans that I'm supposed to do.
And I've still got that video of you that I had to do.
You need to send me that if you still have it.
Man, it's on VHS, man. That's how old that was.
VHS. That's a long time ago.
That was a long time ago.
And it's funny. I had like I said, I had my one of my friends I hadn't seen in 30 years, but honestly, you're right behind that because I think you and I are crossing close to 20. I mean, so God, it's been a long time. When you said that, it just kind of made me think back. It's like, man, that was a long time ago we did that.
Let's see. Yeah, we're probably closer to 25.
Yeah, we might be. Actually, you're right, because you're right. Because I think I talked to Bill and Zach not too long ago, and I think we were saying the same thing about that. So that's just insane. But on the expectation standpoint, when you start showing somebody, you sit them down, you kind of give them a picture as to what they can expect, don't you?
Oh, well, absolutely. I mean, what they can expect, what they can expect from me, what I would expect of them,
See, I
and
like that too. So that's
what
good.
also what they probably expect something of me that is not going to happen.
Right.
So what to not
To learn how to
expect,
golf.
that's yeah, like that. So
Yeah.
I mean, if in the
like
housing
how you
part,
said
if they
that,
think
Mike.
that I'm going to come mow their yard to make their house look good, it's not going to happen.
I like how you said that you took a different approach than Brent, and it's just as important. You not only focused in on the expectation in general, but you said that it's on both sides. It's about not only me, but them too. There's two people that have a set view or understanding as to what's going to happen. And if those views are off or they're inconsistent or even distorted, then we've got a problem. We've got a problem because both of us have to see the expectations. And from a business standpoint, if it's our business, that's where we come in. It should be our motivation to make sure we set the expectations that everybody expects, that they're reachable, that they're realistic, and that everybody is on the same page. So that's a great takeaway from today's show. If you wanted a generic business conversation about expectations, we need to set an expectation level that is agreeable with everybody, because if it's not consistent, we're still going to have problems. And we all have to believe in that expectation. We have to believe that that's what we want to happen. So that's a good takeaway from today. We like to point out the takeaways. That's a good one, because we want to make sure that we are on track to hit what we are trying to do. The negative side of not setting an expectation is like infinity. If you don't start setting expectations, it can go 1,000 different ways. And you honestly deserve everything that you get when that happens. You have no one to blame but yourself. If you're running any type of business, any type of project, any type of company, and you're the one who didn't set expectations, and then 3 or 4 weeks later, it's a complete disaster, you have nobody to blame but yourself. You should have been the one that was very clear as to what was going to happen. In my career, and y'all remember, I come from a very strong accounting financing background, and I actually come from a very strong retail background. I have a lot of my hands in retail, customer service, accounting and finance, real estate, a very strong mix in dealing with people. And I'm going to tell you right now, if you start randomly throwing things out, you're going to get what you should expect. You're going to get randomness. You're going to get random acts that are not consistent. You're not going to be going towards the goal. If you do, it's pure luck that it happened, because you're not focusing in on where you should have been. So this happens to everybody out there. And the expectation at times, and this is where I was going with this, even if things go bad, like the worst that could have happened, if you did your job right, you should have damn well already had said that could possibly happen. This should not be a surprise. You should have said it's very possible that this can happen. You wouldn't have been thrilled telling them that, but you should have at least set the expectation, because when it happens, it's a lot easier for you to say, well, we did discuss that, versus you having some dumbass look on your face going, I just can't believe this happened. That is the worst too. You want to be respected in business or have someone.
It's my normal look.
What's that, Mike?
That's my normal look.
Yeah, you do not want someone coming back at you where you have this just dumb look on your face going, I just can't believe that. Look, nobody likes surprises. Quite honestly, even birthday surprises, nobody likes them. Nobody ever likes a surprise, because a lot of times the surprise wasn't the surprise that they wanted.
Yeah, it's an audit.
That's a great surprise. Fantastic. Nobody likes them for the most part. So from a business standpoint, we have to really try super hard that we're making sure that everybody knows where we're going with the goal in mind and the tracks that are in place. Let's take it from a real estate perspective, because our majority audience is real estate. So let's talk about expectations in real estate, because most of the people that watch our show are watching for that particular reason. So let's start off with talking about the buyer expectations. Mike, what are some general comments when we meet a buyer? What are some things that we might want to prep them for as we go through? You don't have to be thorough with everything. What are just some general ones that we're going to talk to them about that we should say that they should be expecting this as we get into this process?
Could be expecting for it to be a while before you can actually find the home that you're looking for. There's
It
not
could
as
be a
much
while,
out
right?
there.
It could be a while, right?
Could also let them know that we could get shut down again, and looking for homes
That's a new one.
could be very difficult.
So that's good insight. That's why the guys are on the show, because I don't have in my notes to talk about that. And that's a great point. Expectations now revolve around what are COVID expectations? What do we have to prepare them? Mike, with that and said, you went the shutdown route, go the other route with it. What is a new expectation over the last 6 months that we have to tell a buyer they need to be prepared to do when we go looking at houses?
Well, yeah, masks.
There you
I mean, you might have to wear gloves. You might have to have little booties. You
There you
have
go.
to. I mean,
That's
you might have
right.
to be careful what you touch. You might not want to touch as much stuff as you would normally touch, as far as closets, cabinets,
Perfect.
things like that.
So great takeaway from today's show as well on a current event type of thing. One great expectation. That's super good for anybody who's fairly new, and actually anybody who's fairly been doing this for a long time. That is an expectation that should be set. I have to admit, I'm a little embarrassed. I've had a few recently that I've been working with, and I haven't been very good about setting that expectation that you will be encountering these things. I mean, don't get me wrong. I make sure everybody has a mask, but Mike brought up a better point. Mike started talking about the incidentals, things like you really shouldn't touch any door you don't need to. You really shouldn't put your hands on. I haven't done a very good job with that, and I've seen people make those unnecessary movements when they shouldn't have. So maybe my expectations should have been set better than I've been doing. So I love that. That's a current event that's not on a typical expectation, and it has changed the way we do things. So great input. Brent, what are some other things, expectation-wise, business-wise? What are we looking at when we go in? What's the procedures in place that we should tell them they should be careful for? Mike talked about it might take a long time. And that's
I like to make sure that they know that, hey, you better have some money in the bank, because that you're going to write a check for earnest money and option fee up front, plus inspection, plus appraisal. I mean,
right. So I want to stop you right there, because people who do write down, that's a great takeaway from the show as well. If you're talking about expectations from the buy side, you should have set the expectation before it actually comes to fruition that they are going to need to be prepared to have an earnest money check. They're going to have to be prepared to have an option check. They're going to have to be prepared to pay for an inspection. And there are some cases that they might even have to pay for the appraisal, depending on the lender. Now, the reason why that expectation is important, they better have some money in the bank that's accessible, because this isn't loan money. This is money that they're actually going to have to come out of pocket with. So that's a good takeaway from an expectation standpoint. Go ahead, keep going. What else?
No, but I mean, especially like you said, a lot of people think, well, I have to sell my own house. I don't need to pay anything until we close. But no, I mean, they're going to have to at least have 1% of that sales price, available. We also, I set expectations that they're going to have to move and do things on a timely manner. You're going to have to drop off those checks on time. You need to schedule an inspection on time, because it's our fault if we don't tell them that, because ultimately it's always our fault. But if we don't tell them that, they're going to be pissed at us.
Yeah,
so,
we ultimately are the ones that manage this process.
Right. And so, and you can tell too, if it's a client that you can tell is not really listening, I always recommend that you just follow up with an email and just covering your bases. So that way, if they throw something in your face, you can just forward them that email that you've already
Right, so
sent.
that's a great takeaway too. That's an important one. And Brent, obviously he knows that because he presses the things that I teach all the time. That's a big one. Not only, it's funny, I just realized now I'm starting to suffer from social media Zoom. Which lens am I looking at? Because if I have my iPad, I look over here. But if I have my laptop, I look over here. And I just found myself looking over here. And I'm like, what the hell are you looking at? So that's a good takeaway, is you should document. When you set an expectation, you should document it with whoever it was you set that with. So you can always go back to go, no, we discussed this. And I go, not only did we discuss it, but I sent it back to you to reconfirm that you understood that. So that's a huge takeaway too. It should be common sense, but it's not. And it's forgotten a lot of times. You document instructions that are given to a client. You want to be able to go back and say, I told you. that this should have been done.
Yep.
Because you do not want them to do the old he said, she said. You'll never win that. First of all, you'll never win it in court either.
No.
You want to be able to document going, no, that's not what was said. I can tell you, I've been very fortunate from the legal world. I've made it a very prideful statement that I've never been sued in all the years I've been doing this. Now, I've had a lot of people that have been around me that have been sued. And
It's all his underlings.
Say that again?
It's all your underlings. You just sacrifice us.
Some. But I tell you, their troubles start when they can't document something. All they can do is recall. Now, fortunately for us, it's usually the client that's recalling. They rarely document. And that's very beneficial to us in court because the judges won't listen to he said, she said. They won't listen to that. They won't listen to gibberish. They won't listen to I thought, if I remember. What they will listen to and what they will look at is it says at 5:53 p.m. on the 24th, you responded to an email that said they told you to deposit those checks and you didn't do it. So that goes over a lot further in court than just recalling. So that's a good one too. What are some other things we're missing, Mike? What are some other things we might want to set that buyer expectation at?
I'm
having to think.
Close could actually take longer.
Say that. Yeah, close might take longer.
Close could actually take longer.
Back to your continued theme with that. We've been fortunate so far because we haven't seen a lot of delays, but that always exists because of the COVID regulations and some of the things they're requiring for COVID. It is possible that we experience a delay more today than we have in the past. So that's something we might want to set. Plus, that's a generic good expectation all the time, is to tell someone, hey, look, this might not close when it wants to. In fact, that's a bigger one. Let's talk about. You want to talk about a big expectation that I always expect is when you tell a buyer, look, this is when we're trying to close. There is by no means 100% accuracy that we close on that time frame. This is probably the largest expectations. If you want a big takeaway from today's show, especially if you're new, when it comes to setting expectations, one of the number one expectations you should give or you should set is making sure that buyer knows from the very beginning it is very possible that there could be a delay in this process. That goes vice versa for your seller too. Your seller needs to be told this is not a perfect process. And y'all, of all the disappointments and being yelled at that I've ever had in my entire career, 97% of that centers around when we are delayed. All right, so just to show you how large of an expectation this is, 97% of the problems that we have or are yelled at stream from this date moving. And when I say 90% of problems, not all problems, when we get yelled at. When we get yelled at, it typically centers around the date being off, the anticipation of the date being off. And that is why when we set these expectations, we have to thoroughly emphasize from the beginning that it's possible to move. Now, here's the good part about that if it does in fact move, or actually this is the bad part about that, if it does in fact move, they're still angry. Nothing changes the anger of the delay, but it sure is a hell of a lot easier to go, we talked about this.
Yeah.
You should have been prepared, and I know you're not thrilled about it. We aren't either, but you should have at least been prepared. And y'all, the difference there is it's not going to stop them yelling at you. It'll stop them yelling at you for 5 hours. All right. You might get 5 minutes of it, but at some point they're going to acknowledge, yeah, I know we talked about this. You still suck, but you're right. There's no reason to continue to beat this horse down. Right. So that's a huge expectation. I'd say that's in my top 5.
I found that over the years, as I've gotten more experienced as a listing agent, I've become more of a pessimist, and I tell them that up front. I say, I'm very optimistic usually, but here it's my job to keep expectations set. And I'm going to tell you that there are so many hurdles we're going to go through, right? First thing is, don't get excited after you get an offer. Then after you're done with inspections, after you got that repair negotiation, don't get excited because we still have appraisal ahead. After that, don't get excited because we still don't have clear to close. And after that, don't get excited until they've actually signed and you funded. Then you can relax. But
I tell people And I've said it on the show, and you know this more than anybody. Mike knows this too. And a lot of people are surprised when the first time they hear me talk about this, but I think I had this conversation. I'm trying to remember if it wasn't radio last week. It was actually a presentation I did for some of the Austin folks. But everybody's so excited when they get their house under contract. Some people would argue that it's one of the happiest days in their lives outside of getting married or having kids. You know, it's an exciting time frame. And, you know, if you're a professional and you've done it for a long time, you're sitting there watching someone and they're smiling, their giddiness, and you're just kind of waiting for it to subside so you can go, this is about the worst time in your life that you're about to get into. Yeah, because this part sucks. You know, now you're talking about all the barriers that Brent just mentioned. We have to go through an inspection where someone's going to come in and say your house completely sucks, and these are all the things that have to be fixed. Then they're going to come through and say it's not worth what you think it is. It's worth this. Then you're going to have to hope that the person that you don't even know has enough money and they're actually approved to get that money. And then even on top of that, this person that you don't know, you're going to have to hope that, which by the way, you're like relying on half of your life's plans right now on this person you don't even know. That's crazy, isn't it? And you're hoping that they actually show up to close. So Brent's right. I always like to say I'm the most optimistic pessimist you'll ever find in your entire life, because I am a pessimist at heart, and I view that as a very optimistic thing. Because I believe if you understand the pessimistic side, we're going deep here. You have to really think through that. You have to really think if that makes sense or not. But when you cite something like a pessimistic act that could happen, and you bring it up, if it actually happens, it's not going to be near as bad as it could have been because we discussed it. And if it doesn't happen, then there's actually a euphoria in the fact that, oh, awesome, I'm glad we didn't go through that. So it is. I like to say I'm the most optimistic pessimist in the world. Pessimism is not a bad thing. In fact, some people could argue a pessimist can be a very thorough, competent person, but you have to have the outgoing skill on that too. Where real pessimists get in trouble are the ones who believe they're pessimists and then they act like pessimists all the time. Yep. These are people who are typically asses too in real life. So those are the ones that you got to watch. There's a difference for me. I do believe there's different types of pessimism. I do. I believe there's two types. So I love that when we're going through and discussing that particular piece of it. That's an expectation that can go real south super quick. What are some other ones? We've got some of the big ones in there on the buy side. What's some we're missing? We can talk. We can go through it all day long, but I want to.
Price is the biggest one.
Price. All right, great. So Mike brought up on an expectation of price, and it's a good one. We have to set an expectation when we're on the buy side that the house, there's a couple things we're looking at. One, is the house priced accordingly? Meaning, are the other houses that are similar to it, are they in the range? Are they not being unreasonable? Okay, because if they're not being unreasonable, then we should be reasonable with our offer as well. Mm-hmm. So from an expectation standpoint, we're going to tell the buyer, we're going to check the comps on that house. And we're going to make sure those people are in line. And then from the second side of it, we're going to tell them part A and part B. A, if they are reasonable, then we're going to have a reasonable offer. B, if they're not, then we're probably going to ask lower, and we're probably not going to be too optimistic that it's going to go through, because we know we're going to have to offer a lower amount, and it's probably not going to work out. Okay, so that is an expectation that should be set from a price standpoint, that you might not want to get too excited about this. If we go in and see that they're really overpriced, they're probably not going to come down that much. Most sellers who priced it there had a reason for pricing it there, and we probably need to set that expectation before we get involved. Hey, look, just so you know, we're probably not going to have a good chance with this. So that's a good one too. That's a very good one. And we can flip-flop on the seller side too. We can set that expectation that we did price the house accordingly, but here's an expectation that they don't want to hear. It is very possible we have someone come in and lowball us even after we did it. So we have to prepare them that happens. And we have to prepare them what they are going to do if that happens. Once again, setting expectations constantly throughout the process. We're warning them. These are the things that could happen. Here are the alternatives that we see can happen when someone offers on this house. You need to be prepared on what your commentary or response is going to be when those happen. So that's a good one too.
I'm sure you guys would agree too that if you're doing a good job at setting the expectations at the beginning, they're going to build trust in you and they're going to see your demeanor. And so if something pops up that you haven't coached them on, they're going to look to you and they're going to feel more relaxed. But if you kind of ghost them, you don't respond, then they're going to start freaking.
This is a good takeaway. Expectation breeds efficiency and competence. It swims in it because successful people, smart people, competent people know to set expectations. If I'm a buyer who's intelligent and I'm dealing with an agent that hasn't given me any type of guidelines or any type of set procedures that are in place, I'm going to have sincere concerns. And one of the worst things that can happen is when you do have that competent person on the other side and they have to lower their skill set to say, hey, I haven't seen anything yet from you on the timeline or the process that we're going through and what's going to happen. That is an ultimate embarrassment as well. You don't want anybody to ever be telling you what should the procedures be. You're the one who should have already done them. That's a calling call for you did something wrong already, where somebody else starts telling you, hey, what are the steps involved in here? They should have never said that if you did what you were supposed to do. And
well, you set the expectation in the beginning, but you remind them through the whole process.
Good too.
Here's, like you said, here's where you got an offer, you accepted, but now here's what we talked about before. Expect these 3 things because they're coming up in the next 2 to 3 weeks.
Yeah, guys, that's why they're on the show. The people who watch the show, that's why on the show, because that's not scripted. And he just said a major component. It's not just.
But you just texted it to me.
Well, I wish I had. I wish I had. I would have been more intelligent by telling you to say that on the show. But that's a great takeaway. That not only do we set the expectation, but we constantly remind them of what the expectation is, so they never lose sight of what the ultimate goal is. Sometimes, especially if the process is long, we forget. We forget where we're at and they forget where they're at. And once you forget what the expectation is, you stop utilizing the procedures you need to do in place to make that expectation happen. Okay, what else?
Well, I mean, there's 2 ones. One's the smaller one is you have to make sure that your buyers know, hey, have your utilities turned on before you move in, because that's kind of a pain. But I think the biggest one is actually a third. Make sure you're communicating with your lender. And the biggest, though, is what to ask for on inspection for repairs, right?
So those are 2 big ones he just jumped into. So let's talk about, we have an inspection expectation and we have a lending expectation. This will probably take us to the end of the show because they are the main topics of setting expectations from the real estate standpoint. So we've talked about this many times on the show, and it's always worthy of discussing again when we're discussing expectations. But when we have a buyer who's about to do an inspection, we are going to set some primary expectations in place. The first one is we are going to tell them up front that report is going to come back and make it look like that house is falling into the ground. It's going to be written all up. It's going to have all these deficiencies. And here's the expectation. That's okay as long as they are code-based expectations or code-based changes that have happened over years. For instance, a dryer vent that has to vent through the outside. In 1990, they started experiencing a dryer vent that was usually into the attic. Prior to 1990, there was a fire hazard because it could be too warm and it could start a house on fire. So they said that those dryer vents have to be vented to the outside. Well, if you're buying a house from 1970, the dryer vent's inside. The expectation should not be that the seller is going to have to cut the hole open and put that dryer vent out to come up to code in 2020. They've lived there for some 40 years. Why the hell should they have to do that now? That is something we're going to set expectations on. That shouldn't be what we ask for. The expectation should be we are going to ask for things that materially affect this house day to day. Meaning if the shower doesn't work, it needs to work. If the air conditioning doesn't work, it needs to work. If the stove doesn't work, it needs to work. And that's a great takeaway, especially for anybody who's new on the show. When you're setting expectations with your buyer, it is crucial that before you get to that inspection, this is worthless if you do it after. You have to do it before. You have to tell them what's going to happen. And once it does happen, this is what we're going to do about it. That's going to remove and eliminate all this BS where you don't do that. And then the buyer asks for everything on the inspection report, which some of them actually do. Some buyers say, I want the whole thing fixed. And let me tell you, if that's happened to you yet in your career, that's embarrassing, because that means you didn't do a damn thing to tell that buyer. They should have known that that's not what the expectation is going to be. It means you completely didn't do what you were supposed to be doing. So yeah, we're definitely going to set those. And vice versa for the seller. We're going to tell the seller, look, you need to be prepared. There are certain things you have to fix if this goes bad. If that thing comes back and says that you have a foundation issue, you better be prepared to fix that foundation. That's not going to be pushed under the rug. You're going to have to do it. So the expectations flow both ways. And then you have the financing side. There has to be an expectation that's set in place with the buyer that they go solicit a lender that's going to lend them money, that they get pre-approved, and it's not a shady pre-approval, that they're confident that it's a good pre-approval, and that they're also very forthcoming with the lender. So this is a good takeaway from the show. Setting the expectation to your buyer and telling them when they go talk to that lender, you tell them to tell them every single thing that's happened to them. And that includes their little bad check cashing charge from 20 years ago that they just nonchalantly forgot about. That type of stuff sometimes shows up in underwriting. There are weird things that the underwriter can catch. So you're only hurting yourself by being quiet about what your past is. They're going to find it. If it's financial based, they're going to find it. So make sure you're very upfront with the lender. It's only going to hurt yourself, because what's going to happen is if you don't set those expectations, you get to day 20 of the close, of a 30-day close, and now the underwriter says, well, what's this hit from 5 years ago? And now you don't qualify and you have to back out. You should have known damn good and well already that that was going to happen. Why did you waste everybody's time? So that's where expectations here become important as well. A couple of earlier comments in the chat box from what we started about. David Tanner mentioned that the sun will rise, people will still buy houses. He's right. The sun continues to come up, at least in the world we live in right now. The sun continues to come up, and if it continues to come up, it's a new day. No matter what is around us, whether it's an election, COVID, it's still there. We move on. So I like that comment. And then he said he noticed that there's already some school closings, even in the Coppell ISD. We've heard that as well. We've heard a lot of schools that are going back and forth on whether they need to close or not. We'll tell you something I heard the other day, and this is a generic comment for all schools that are out there, because I've heard this from multiple sources. And it's interesting. And I actually wish I'd started the show off with this, but it's just as good to finish with it, because this is something to really start thinking about. Whether your kids right now, their schools are closed, or they have been going through temporary closings. One thing that people are starting to find out, and this isn't an opinion, that this is factual in some of the schools, they're starting to find out that at the school, that's not where they get COVID. They're getting COVID from the house, and then they bring it into the school. It's not the school itself that they're getting COVID. And just like a lot of people have discussed from the beginning, the kids really have a hard time picking up COVID themselves when they're surrounded by a lot of kids, because a lot of the kids are just not capable of picking the disease, the virus up. That doesn't mean they can't do it, but it's not like if a bunch of adults are in there where they could thrive it. So a lot of the things that are being experienced right now with these closings, some people are starting to say, that's not where they're getting it. We can close everything. They're still going to get it if they were going to get it. So that's another thing because there are a lot of people who are thinking about going virtual the rest of the year. You have a lot of schools that are thinking about just finishing out the year virtual. Now, I will give my opinion on that. I think it's wrong. I don't care what anybody says. If you want to argue with me about the virus is going to spread and that's harmful, I'll argue with you about it, because I think the virus spreads no matter what way you do it. But the kids being out of school is a tough one. Okay? Kids being out of school is a tough one because they're not experiencing what we all had to experience to get where we are. That's a tough call. I'm not saying if you have your kids virtual, that's a bad decision on your part. You might very well be doing it because you have health concerns in your house. There might be a million other reasons why you're doing it. But the generic belief that they shouldn't be going to school is very hard. And, of all the things that have been discussed, and that PhDs are writing on right now, watch what the detriment has been for even the 6 or 7 months that the kids have kind of been going into school and kind of not been going out of school. Watch how detrimental that is going to be in years to come with the studies they find out for that little bit of time, what it's caused. I don't know if y'all know it, but even the people that I've read a lot of studies that the people who are doing the most of the schools are saying they're running a 30 to 40% participation in virtual. Of that 30 to 40%, 67 to 70% of those kids are truant. And that's a concern, which means they can't even sit in front of the stupid computer because they're basically just doing whatever they want. And that's a huge danger because not only are they falling behind socially, but now they're falling behind education-wise because they are not getting the true education that they're supposed to be getting. That's tough. And I just found that
Scary.
out. I just read a few studies on that this week, and it kind of pushed me back because I'm like, wow. I go, that is something I didn't think about. So again, something that we're having to deal with. But in the end, the belief that we can put a stop without a vaccine, I just don't know how far we can go with that. Okay, look, expectations can go forever. And that's why we do it every 6 months. We get back into it and we just start discussing it. It's a constant rotation topic on the show because it's an important one. And because it not only focuses on real estate, it focuses on business. So with that said, we're going to go ahead and end the show today because we can just keep going forever on this one. As always, thank y'all for watching. Again, thank y'all for all the views last week. Thank you for both of our sponsors out there. Thank y'all for thank you for putting that down there, Mark, once again. But thank you for all the constant watches. Thank you for continuing to push it to other people, telling them, hey, you should watch the show. There's a lot of good stuff. Remember, our shows are always archived on KBGI Radio Facebook page, KBGI Media. That is our internal source for our advertising and our podcast and our broadcast. I will also put a plug in. I do this occasionally. I don't do it enough. For anybody who watches the show, podcasts have become a lot more popular with Zoom, which I kind of object to because, you really should be doing podcasts for other reasons, not because the world in Zoom started making you do it like that. But if you are any type of business owner, real estate, or any type of self-employed person, these podcasts, they are very well worth the time. They are very helpful to our recruiting needs. They're very helpful to our educational needs. They're very important for our exposure. And it is not some astronomical amount it takes to be a part or do these podcasts. If anybody ever wants more information on how we do these things, my buddy Mark Warner runs KVGI. He owns it. He's the owner, the producer. He does everything and everything that you see, all the graphics and all the interaction that we have. If you ever want to know how easy that is, just give me a shout and I'll put you into contact with him. My contact's super easy. And it's always smokerbroker@kw.com. You can always call me at 214-683-8973. Again, that's 214-683-8973. And it should always go without saying, if you ever are interested about being a real estate agent, come talk to us. If you're ever interested about someone who not only does full-time real estate agency, but also practices part-time and caters to part-time real estate, that is what we expertise better than anybody in this country. Y'all, thanks for watching. Y'all have a great week. Get ready for the holidays. The holidays are coming. Make it the best you can. Take care.